Gravel crunched under the tires of Krista Pantaleano's car as she guided her Ford Escort up the driveway toward a small parking area. Dusk loomed over the Cuyahoga Valley National Park as she backed her car into the only available spot and got out of her vehicle. The path toward Blue Hen Falls started a few feet to the left, a black ribbon winding down the hill under a canopy of trees. As leaves rustled and moths fluttered about, Pantaleano took some of the last steps of her life. The date was April 5th, 1998, and what happened early that spring evening remains a mystery. Not even a 15-month investigation by federal and local officials pried answers out of the dark woods where the Twinsburg woman's body was found 2 days later. Pantaleano clocked out from her nursing shift about 3:25 p.m. on that Sunday, according to a report prepared by the FBI and given to Pantaleano's family. Coworkers saw her talking to a white man wearing an aqua blue jacket in the hospital parking lot before she left work. Minutes later, a friend saw her at the Circuit City store in nearby North Randall. After a brief discussion, Pantaleano got in her car and drove east on 480 toward her Pebble Creek apartment in Twinsburg, where investigators believe she stayed until 6 p.m. Visitors at Blue Hen Falls saw a woman matching Pantaleano's description pull into the parking lot in a green hatchback about a half hour later. A black, newer model pickup truck, or van, driven by a white man with dark hair followed. At 7 p.m., hikers returning to the parking lot found just one other car, a green hatchback with a Chris RN vanity plate, beside their own. The next day, at 8:10 a.m., a park ranger saw Pantaleano's frost-covered car in the parking lot. 3 hours later, a Peninsula police officer observed the locked vehicle in the same spot. When rangers came across the green hatchback again at 9:10 a.m. Tuesday, they phoned Twinsburg police and asked for a welfare check on Pantaleano. Meridia South Pointe officials had filed a missing person report with Twinsburg at 8:45 a.m. after Pantaleano failed to show up for work for the second consecutive day. A hasty search of the Blue Hen Falls area began. About an hour later, park rangers found Pantaleano's body in an area of steep ravines about a quarter mile from her car, behind the Boston Mills ski area off Boston Mills Road in Boston Township. Authorities said her body was found on a plateau not far from the Buckeye Trail, clad in a red sweatshirt, black jogging pants and jacket and white running shoes. Yet that clothing, her mother said, was not the usual attire she wore for jogging. Medical examiner Marvin Piet listed exposure and hypothermia as the immediate cause of death on the certificate filed with the Ohio Department of Health's Division of Vital Statistics. The cause, however, was a consequence of respiratory and motor function inhibition brought on by the cumulative effects of drugs, according to Piat's report. The drugs found in Pantaleano's body were medications only available if prescribed by a physician or would only be used in a hospital setting under the orders of a physician, according to the FBI report. Agents involved with the case would not identify the drugs, but said they were most typically used in surgery. 2 injection sites were found on Pantaleano's body during the autopsy. Medical records do not show Pantaleano receiving an injection for any medical purpose or receiving any medical treatment in the days before her death. No syringes or used medication vials were found at the scene or in Pantaleano's car or home. None of the typical things you'd look for are there to explain this, FBI agent Campbell said. Some detailed toxicology and tissue sample tests are pending at an FBI lab. Other pieces of information also left investigators puzzled. Pantaleano's car keys have never been found, despite extensive searches of the Blue Hen Falls area by federal, county, and local officials. However, her house keys were found at Pantaleano's left hand. Family members said Pantaleano always locked her house keys in her car and carried her car keys while on park visits. A gold necklace Pantaleano always wore, with a gold charm shaped like a horse, also has never been found. It all adds up to nothing. Right now, we're not very comfortable not understanding what happened to one of our visitors here. We're just having difficulty coming up with answers, said Chief Ranger Brian McHugh. Hopefully, a day will come when this will be solved. We just need more information. 2 possibilities: suicide or homicide. Those seem the only viable options. Those close to Pantaleano cannot fathom the former. She had plans to visit her parents the following week with her sons. Her job was going well. Even her apartment's refrigerator was well stocked with food. This, her family says, was not the portrait of a person facing death. Besides, they said, some trace of suicide would have been left behind. Investigators never located a suicide note or the means by which a suicide would have been carried out. It's just not possible, Pantaleano's father said. I have no doubt someone is responsible. But who? Investigators say they've talked to anybody remotely connected with Pantaleano. She had several suitors and was actively dating. There was an ex-boyfriend, a doctor who is a person of interest. Off and on from 1994 to 1998, Christa dated R.M. Jr., an Akron dermatologist. In November 1996, R.M. was arrested by Twinsburg police, and according to the report, he was accused of breaking into her apartment, throwing her to the floor, and repeatedly kicking and striking her. She told police R.M. was angry because she wanted to break up with him. He was charged with assault and aggravated burglary, according to news reports in the Cleveland Plain Dealer and a broadcast on WEWS-TV, Channel 5. On November 26, 1996, R.M. pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of criminal damaging and 1 count of assault in Cuyahoga Falls Municipal Court, according to a consent agreement he signed with the State Medical Board of Ohio that was filed October 12, 2004. According to that agreement, R.M. admitted he had answered no to a question on his 1998 renewal application with the board on or about April 6, 1998, as to whether he had been found guilty of or pleaded guilty or no contest to a felony or misdemeanor since his last application. In January 1997, he was sentenced to 3 years probation and paid $3,425 in restitution to Krista Pantaleano, according to published reports. He was granted a protective order against unwanted contact, but by August that year, the two were dating again, her family said. However, Campbell said there just isn't enough evidence to substantiate a crime, much less target a suspect. We have our suspicions, he said, but that's about all we have. I wish we had more, McHugh added. I wish we could solve this for her family. They deserve to know. Donald and Fran Sotterl continue to wait. They said they realize investigators have done everything possible so far. They also understand the difficulties inherent in such a case. They said they get by on the faith that justice will be served. We asked the investigators why they've spent so much time and money on this, Fran Sauter said, and they told us it was because they believe the information they need is out there somewhere. Everyone's still just figuring out where. The Cuyahoga Valley Rangers have a file on Pantaleano's death that is 8 feet thick, but it is off limits to the public and the media. What details are known come from interviews with her family, old newspaper clippings, and any details officials released in 1998 to 99 when the investigation was most active. Because her death occurred on federal land in northern Summit County, the 3 agencies were involved in the investigation, but none claimed to have found any evidence or identified any suspects. Investigators said they questioned more than 100 people with connections to her, including her ex-husband and her boyfriend. We were all working it together almost on a mini task force setting, said FBI Special Agent Scott Wilson. But at this point, he said, we haven't solved the case or know what happened to her or how she got there. Cuyahoga Valley Chief Ranger Christopher Ryan says the case remains open and active and under investigation, and they are still optimistic that her death can be solved. But Summit County Sheriff's Detective Jeffrey Franklin notes that her death is not even listed as a homicide, and while it is still an open investigation, there has been no active work on it for years. Family and friends of Pantaleano remain convinced this is a case of murder. They say someone killed the 31-year-old. Donald and Fran Sauter, Pantaleano's parents, posted a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of their daughter's killer. We've been sitting here waiting for that phone to ring for 15 months, Donald Sauter said during a telephone interview from his northern Michigan home. We keep waiting to hear that they arrested that son of a bitch who did this. But the call hasn't come, and that's why we put out the reward. Someone somewhere, knows something. Ask those who were close to Pantaleano to describe her, and their voices immediately pick up. She was a dynamo, they say. Words like perky, spunky, and energetic follow as they talk about what made the attractive, petite blonde so special. And her life was only getting better, they said. She was doing all of the things she wanted to do, said her ex-husband, James Pantaleano, who maintained a close relationship with Christa and her family after their 1992 divorce. She was a very driven person, and she was getting to where she wanted to be. Pantaleano pursued a nursing career after the divorce, graduating with honors from the Meridia School of Nursing in 1996. She began working at Meridia South Pointe Hospital in Warrensville Heights, just a short drive on Interstate 480 from her Twinsburg apartment. Sixth-floor co-workers said Pantaleano's patients loved her. She was always willing to spend some extra time at their bedside talking to them and just trying to make them feel better, said one nurse, who asked not to be named because of the unsolved nature of Pantaleano's death. We still have people ask about her. Her two sons, now 9 and 8, were central in her life. They were her top priority, Pantaleano's mother, Fran Sauter, said. The outdoors also called to Pantaleano, whose strength gained from years of athletics and hard work belied her 5'3" 110-pound frame. She worked as a horse groomer at Northfield Park, where she wasn't afraid to pull on gloves and put her back into laborious tasks. She also spent a lot of time in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, biking and running the many trails as she had since attending high school in Medina. Sports equipment filled her 1993 Ford Escort hatchback when she pulled into the Blue Hen Falls parking area on the last day anyone saw her alive. Pantaleano's family buried her in Our Lady of Victory Cemetery in Paradise, Michigan. After all these years, we've been through all the emotions: anger, depression, hopelessness, frustration, Fran Sauter said. It was and is tough not knowing what happened. I'm not one to seek revenge, but there are others in our family who feel different. I was angry, and I can't say that my anger has lessened. It just doesn't take up all of our time like it once did. Chris is on our minds all the time, on a daily basis, she said. We remember her all the time and miss her all the time. She is still in our conversations as if she was still alive. We want people to remember. We've not forgotten. I hate that people have forgotten. The truth is still out there, she said. Somebody knows what happened to Christa,